Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Victorian Cowboy, and welcome to our Blood of Elves book club. This will be discussing chapter 5, I believe it is. In this chapter, we have Geralt, and we actually see things from his point of view for a little while, which is almost a first for this book. The short stories are all told from his perspective, but the novel so far has jumped around, and very few of them have been from his point of view. And then it switches over to Dandelion's point of view. So, to begin with, I thought it was a really interesting way to kind of introduce the passage of time through the letters that Geralt has. He has a letter from Ciri, and he has a letter from Yennefer. And it's really telling about the state of Geralt's relationship with Yennefer right now, based on his regret, to begin with, about how he entitled the letter Dear Friend, and how Yennefer keeps throwing that phrase Dear Friend back in his face. So I think it will be really interesting to see what happens once those two are reintroduced, meet each other face to face, because Yennefer was then going to take care of Ciri, or at least watch over her more so, while Geralt is out. And we only realize this later, that Geralt is out actually laying a trap to try and bait Reince into coming and finding him so he can actually learn more. And we learn that in the Dandelion portion of the chapter, in which Dandelion is talking with Dijkstra and Philippa Eilhart and some of the, as he refers to them, snoopier sections of society. But back to the ship and Geralt. I just really enjoyed reading the letters and just seeing the perspectives, and then getting to hear how Geralt is responding to some of the things that are present there. I thought that was finally a little bit more refreshing, because for me, coming off of the short story books, I've been wanting to get back to Geralt's mind and what he's been doing and thinking. Granted, I think the way the books are written, with having things be from everyone else's perspective around him, really helps paint a picture of how the Witcher works and how he's viewed by society and even his friends. I also thought it was really interesting, the exchange between him and the lecturer from Oxenfurt, Linus Pitt, because it goes almost into a full environmentalist mode there, where they're both talking about how humans are polluting the river and polluting the delta and destroying the nature that is there and causing these changes to occur. Though Pitt, the lecturer, is very much more book learning and very scholarly and eruditic, in a way that's almost detrimental to the cause, versus Geralt, who's the epitome of field work, and a lot of what he knows he's learned through working in these environments, not conducting scientific experiments, but just through observation. So Geralt knows things that Linus Pitt couldn't possibly understand, because he hasn't been out there working in this environment, nor does he fully understand mutations and some of the things that the witches themselves have to go through. So that's how Geralt can talk about this creature that's been preying on the shipping lanes, that does eventually show up and create some havoc. But I just thought it was really interesting that it for a little while there switches from this story about wars and power struggles and whatnot to this environmentalist policy. But I think it makes sense, seeing as in the last chapter we see Geralt talk about why he's not taking up arms against the Scoia'tael, and that's because, again, it's more of that conservationist movement of these people, especially the elves and the dwarves and whatnot, who are already endangered, and so to take up arms would be to condemn them to oblivion. And in the same way, he views nature that way, where while he does have a job to do, which is eradicating monsters from the land, he recognizes not only that he is eradicating these creatures and pushing them towards the brink of extinction, which he isn't necessarily proud of, but he recognizes why it's a task he's required to do, but he also recognizes how mankind is forcing them to become even more vicious, even more terrifying entities that haven't been seen before. Also, it was interesting that rather than being a fighting war going on right now between Nilfgaard and some of the other, I can't think of the other countries' names, but Nilfgaard and some of the other countries there in the area, it's actually a trade war that they're working to prevent. So that's why you have the customs officers come on board. And it's something that I don't think a lot of, say, fantasy novels or just a lot of general storytelling, like war stories, take into account the idea that we don't have to beat you with swords and guns. We'll just force your economy to crash if we have to. And then your own people will revolt against you and our job's done. They'll come to us because we've got the cheap goods. So I thought that was a really interesting point to look at. And then the one thing I want to point out is Geralt has essentially a Murtaugh moment. If you've seen Lethal Weapon, the refrain is, "I'm getting too old for this shit." And Geralt repeats a couple of times after pulling himself out of the water and saving the kid and fighting this creature but losing the sources, that he is feeling too old for this. Which I think might be a telling sign, because we don't actually know how old Geralt is, but he is getting up there, and there's rumors of his death, and it talks about him getting slower and things like that. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out over the course of this series. The idea that he's getting older and not as agile. He's definitely not to the point of Vesemir, though, who is definitely considered old even for a Witcher. So we'll have to see about that. Now, moving on to the Dandelion portion of the book. Dandelion is in the College of Oxenfurt. Apparently he loves the city. It would make sense. It's a place of learning, and people enjoy those who have stories to tell, which Dandelion certainly does. And there's just this whole festive atmosphere in the city. It's a college town, for pity's sake. I mean, in America, college towns are definitely thought of in a similar way. And so it is nice to see, though, that the reason Dandelion continues to roam rather than settling down, which you might assume he would, is because he has the wanderlust. He enjoys the travel and the adventure, even if it gets him into trouble and he complains about it. He actually longs for that. It also was interesting just to see like how students are portrayed in this as being able to spot spies or snoops and spooks and whatnot. And just how students dislike them, and the general like rebellious anti-establishment movement of the students. And of course it's kind of fun to see that Dandelion has like relationships with several of these students, because he is technically a guest lecturer there rather than a full-time lecturer, so he goes around and does work. We also get introduced to Dijkstra and Philippa Eilhart here, as somebody who played most of the Witcher I'm about halfway through the main campaign of the Witcher 3 video game. I was introduced to those characters, so I know a little bit about them. How Dijkstra is a spy master, and Philippa is part of the circle of mages and an advisor to the One King. And it's just interesting that everybody wants Ciri, but nobody yet has really talked about just why. Like, we know she's a source, but we don't know the full power of a source yet. It's hinted at, but it's never really stated. So everybody wants her for some reason, and they're going to extreme lengths to get her. And even through the deception and everybody recognizing that everybody was lying at the meeting with Dandelion and Dijkstra, it's which was funny because like they're spies. Everyone's lying with the other spies. Like, all the spies and the mages, they're all lying to each other, and everybody knows it, but everybody's playing along with it, because they know that if they were to call each other out on the bullshit, they'd never get anywhere. So, it also was interesting to see how agile Dandelion is, both with his wit and how he's able to keep up with the lies, but also afterwards when he sneaks out of the college and goes to find Geralt, and he's, jumping fences and whatnot. And I always kind of assumed he would be because of how many scorned ex-lovers or angered husbands he's used to running away from. But just to see the extent to which he can move through these environments is really cool, to know that there's somebody who is more artistic and yet extraordinarily capable physically, even though he's not a fighter. So I thought that was a nice thing to see. Also, it's interesting to see that, polymorphism, the ability to change your shape, is actually a thing in this world. So Philippa takes the shape of a eagle, or not an eagle, owl, a grey owl, to come in and warn Geralt. And she explains a really interesting thing: is she's there to keep the king from making a mistake, and sometimes that means she has to work against the king to prevent the mistake in the decision he's already made. So that's, I think, a really interesting way to look at how one chooses advisors and considers the people who work for them and with them. So I thought that was cool. And then, of course, the chapter ends with Shawnee, the medical student who Dandelion had entrusted to go and inform Geralt of what was going on, who then, of course, fell into bed with Geralt because apparently women just love a witcher, but claiming that she does know Rhines, or know of him, or have information on this shady character who's trying to get Ciri and has damaged the people around her. Or around her. So, like Dandelion and come after Yennefer. Well, Yennefer came after him, but still, the instigator of the conflict currently is Rhines, who is working for somebody who is an unknown entity currently. So it's just, I'm really interested to see what Shani knows. And then I did start reading the next section, which begins with the king. It's another name with a V. I want to say Vesemir. It's not Vesemir, but it's the king holding council with several of the other heads of state. So that will be for next week. We'll discuss the council being held. So tune in next Wednesday for the next installment of this video series. I'm really enjoying this. Please comment in the comments. Where else would you comment? Comment in the comments. Let us know what you thought. Put your thoughts down. Share with us your ideas, your thoughts. If you're reading along with us for the first time, please feel free to speculate. If you've read it in before, feel free to still talk to us about what's going on. I appreciate it. I think it's a great way for us to connect with each other. And I love good literature. I love good stories. It's why I teach theatre, and it's why I'm trained in English and language and whatnot, and English literature. So I hope you're enjoying this. I'm enjoying this. Please have a good one. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our video. We do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, give us a like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought, and as always, have a good one.